I never planned on staying long in this town. To me, it was just another dot on the map. Another quiet place where people nodded politely at you in the morning but didn't bother to ask your name. I liked it that way. It made it easier to keep my head down, take on whatever odd jobs came my way, and move on before anyone started asking the sort of questions I didn't want to answer. I was good with my hands: wood, nails, roofs, fences, barns. If something was broken, I could fix it. Folks around here learned that fast enough, and soon I had steady work from ranchers who needed someone they could trust not to cut corners. I paid the bills, and at the end of the day I had just enough money for a room above the feed store and a warm meal at the diner. That was all I asked of life anymore. Once upon a time I'd asked for more, but that was before everything fell apart. When I was younger, I'd been foolish enough to think love was simple. I met a man who made me believe in forever. He had the kind of smile that could light up an empty room, the kind of laugh that made you want to laugh too. We kept our relationship quiet, out of necessity, out of fear, but to me those stolen moments behind closed doors were the truest part of my life. Until they weren't. Word got out. Small towns have a way of pulling secrets out into the light, even ones you think you've buried deep. It wasn't long before whispers turned to stares, stares turned to sermons, and sermons turned to the cold silence of people I once called family. My father couldn't look me in the eye. My mother cried every time she saw me, as though I'd died and she was mourning what was left. And him, the man I thought would fight beside me, he left. Said he couldn't live being branded as one of them. That was the day I swore off love. It wasn't worth the shame, the heartache, the abandonment. I told myself I'd never put my heart in anyone's hands again. And for a while I believed it. So I worked. Hard labor didn't leave much room for daydreams or longing. I filled my hours with hammer blows and splinters, climbed ladders until my muscles ached, repaired shingles under the hot sun until sweat blurred my vision. Every nail I drove was a reminder. Keep busy, keep moving, don't let your heart wander. It worked, mostly, until the morning I got a call from a rancher on the edge of town. His barn roof had been battered by the last storm, and he wanted it patched before the autumn rains set in. I'd heard of him before. Everyone had. He was the kind of man who turned heads without trying, broad shoulders, boots worn from years in the saddle, a quiet confidence that carried across any room he walked into. They said he kept to himself mostly, but when he did speak, people listened. I told myself it didn't matter who he was. To me, he was just another job, another roof to fix, another paycheck to tuck away. But when I arrived at the ranch that morning, hammer in hand, and saw him leaning against the fence with his hat tilted low over his eyes, I felt something stir in me I hadn't felt in years. I pushed it down. "Barn roof's leaking," he said simply, his voice deep, steady. "Think you can handle it?" "I've handled worse," I replied, keeping my tone clipped, professional. He gave a slow nod, and for a moment his gaze lingered on me a little too long. I shifted uncomfortably, telling myself I was imagining it. The barn stood tall against the horizon. Red paint faded and would weathered by time. The roof, though, was a mess. Shingles cracked, some missing entirely, a couple of beams sagging where the storm had torn through. It would take a few days' work, maybe longer if the weather turned again. "Ladders in the shed," the cowboy said. "But roof's steep. Be careful." "I know what I'm doing," I muttered, though truth be told, I always felt a twist of nerves when climbing higher than I needed to. Heights never scared me as much as the thought of falling. Still, I wasn't about to let him or anyone see that. I propped the ladder against the side of the barn, testing its sturdiness before climbing. The sun was already high, beating down hard, and I could feel sweat gathering at the back of my neck as I hauled my tool belt up with me. The roof creaked beneath my boots, shifting slightly under my weight. "Careful." I heard him call from below, his tone softer this time, almost teasing. I ignored him and focused on the task at hand. Hammer, nails, steady footing. One wrong move and I'd be tumbling down, but I told myself I'd done this 100 times before. The wind picked up as I stepped farther along the sloped edge, carrying with it the scent of hay and horses. My boot slid against a loose shingle, sending it clattering down the side of the barn. My heart lurched, balance wavering. For a split second, I thought I was going to fall. Then I felt it, firm and steady, a hand pressed against the small of my back. "Got you?" A low voice murmured just behind me. I froze, every muscle locked, not just from the shock of almost slipping, but from the warmth of that touch. Strong fingers spread across my back, grounding me, steadying me. And for the first time in a long time, my heart betrayed me. It skipped, then hammered against my chest like it wanted to break free. I turned my head just enough to catch a glimpse of him. Those piercing eyes, closer than I'd expected, watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. He didn't move his hand, and I didn't want him to. His hand stayed on my back a little longer than it needed to. Long enough that I noticed the warmth seeping through my shirt. Long enough that I had to fight the urge to lean into it. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment the whole barnyard fell quiet. Just the sound of the wind shifting through the grass and his steady voice breaking through my panic. "You all right?" he asked, his tone calm, almost casual. "Yeah," I managed, forcing myself to steady my feet. "Just slipped a bit. I'm fine." He gave a short nod, though his hand didn't leave until he was sure I wasn't about to tumble off the roof. When he finally stepped back, I exhaled the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I got back to hammering, nails biting into the shingles, wood creaking under each strike. But I could feel him watching me. Every time I glanced sideways, there he was, arms folded, sunburnt skin gleaming beneath the noon light, hat tilted just enough to shadow his eyes. Except his eyes still cut through, sharp as steel, blue as a clear winter sky. I told myself it was nothing. Men looked at men all the time, sizing them up, weighing strength or skill. That's all it was. At least, that's what I tried to believe. But then he climbed up beside me, boots steady, hands sure, like he'd done this kind of work his whole life. He moved close, too close for comfort, and when I shifted to make room he just grinned, that damn smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Roof's big," he said, voice low. "Might as well share the load." "I've got it handled," I muttered, focusing hard on the nail I was driving. "Didn't say you didn't." He leaned in, just enough that his shoulder brushed mine. "But two's better than one, don't you think?" I froze for half a beat, then kept working. I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of rattling me. Still, I felt the weight of him there, the heat of his body, the way his elbow brushed mine when he reached for a shingle. It was subtle, like he knew exactly how close to stand to make my heart thud without ever making it obvious. And then it happened. I bent down to grab another shingle, awkwardly balancing my tool belt. As I straightened, his hand slid across my lower back, firm and deliberate. "So yummy," he whispered, low enough that only I could hear. My hammer nearly slipped from my grip. My chest tightened, and heat rushed to my face so fast it made me dizzy. I couldn't tell if he was teasing, joking, or dead serious. And worse, I couldn't tell what scared me more. The possibility that he meant it or the possibility that he didn't. I forced a laugh that sounded too rough. "You always flirt with guys trying to fix your roof?" His smirk widened, eyes glinting like he'd just won some unspoken game. "Only the ones worth looking at." I wanted to snap back, tell him to knock it off, remind him that I was here to work, not whatever this was, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I hammered harder, nails bending under my shaking grip. Inside, my thoughts were a storm. I can't go through heartbreak again. I can't. Not after last time. He must have seen something in my face, because for a moment his teasing softened. He worked quietly beside me, passing me nails, steadying the ladder when I shifted. Every move was careful, almost tender. It made me angrier somehow that he could play at both the flirt and the gentleman when all I wanted was to feel nothing at all. By midday the sun had climbed high, baking the shingles until they burned hot under our hands. Sweat trickled down my spine, and my arms ached from the steady rhythm of hammering. I was about to suggest we take a break when he wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist and said, "Lunch?" I shook my head. "Got more to finish up here. You'll work yourself into the ground. I've done it before." His eyes narrowed slightly, not unkind but with a patience that unsettled me. He sat down right there on the slant of the roof, balancing like it was second nature, and pulled a wrapped sandwich from his back pocket. He took a bite, chewed, then offered the other half to me. I hesitated, then took it. Not because I wanted to, but because my stomach reminded me I hadn't eaten since dawn. We ate in silence, the kind that felt like it stretched longer than it should have. Every so often, I caught him watching me again. Not the kind of watching that judged or mocked, but the kind that studied like he was trying to memorize something. When I finally couldn't take it anymore, I set down the sandwich and said, "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" His smirk curved again, though softer this time. "Maybe I like what I see." I looked away quickly, heart hammering, words dying in my throat. We worked through the rest of the afternoon without much talk. But every touch, every brush of his hand against mine, every shared glance, it all piled up inside me, sparking something I'd buried years ago. By the time we climbed down from the roof, my muscles were sore and my head was spinning. I packed my tools, eager to get away before I said or did something foolish. But just as I turned to leave, he stepped in front of me. The sun was setting behind him, turning the sky to fire, and his eyes caught the light in a way that made it impossible to look anywhere else. He tilted his head slightly, studying me with that same unreadable gaze. Then he asked, his voice quiet but steady, "What if I said I don't want you to leave after this job?" The words hit me harder than any fall from that roof ever could. His words echoed long after I left the ranch that evening. What if I said I don't want you to leave after this job? I'd heard plenty of things in my life. Insults, sermons, accusations, but never that. Never someone saying they wanted me to stay. The thought stuck in my chest like a splinter I couldn't pull free. I told myself it was just a game to him. A bit of cowboy mischief, something to pass the time while the roof got fixed. Men like him, handsome, confident, admired, didn't look twice at men like me, not in the ways that mattered. And even if he did mean it, I couldn't go through heartbreak again. That night, I lay awake in my cramped little room above the feed store, staring at the cracked ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his smirk, the way his eyes softened when he looked at me, the feel of his hand on my back when I slipped. My body remembered even if my mind screamed at me to forget. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. I'd work, I'd get paid, and then I'd leave town like I always did. That was safer, cleaner. But when I showed up at the ranch the next day, he was waiting. "Evening," he drawled as the sun dipped low, dust catching golden in the light. "Dinner's ready. Come sit." I blinked at him, hammer in hand. "Dinner?" He gestured toward the house. "Cooked it myself. Or do you plan on working till you fall off that roof?" I should have said no. I should have kept my distance. But something in his tone, half command, half invitation, pulled me along before I had the sense to resist. Inside, the kitchen smelled of roasted meat and fresh bread. The table was set simple, 2 plates, 2 glasses, a bottle of whiskey waiting between them. I sat stiffly across from him, my calloused hands awkward on the wood. First, we ate in silence. He chewed slow, watching me with that steady, unblinking gaze. My nerves twisted tighter with every passing second. Finally, he leaned back, poured us each a drink, and said, "You always this quiet? Or just when someone's looking at you too much?" I swallowed hard, avoiding his eyes. "Just not much to say." He chuckled low, the sound warm and teasing. "Funny. I've been watching you work for weeks now, and I'd say you've got plenty worth saying. Just keep it locked up tighter than a barn door in winter." That made me glance up. His smirk had softened, replaced by something else. Curiosity. Respect, maybe. "You've been watching me?" I asked, suspicion edging my voice. "Every day," he admitted easily. "You come in quiet, work hard, never ask for more than your pay. Most men around here can't hammer 2 nails straight without bragging about it for days. But you..." His eyes lingered on me, steady, searching. "You carry yourself like a man who's been through storms and still stands tall. I like that." Heat crept into my face, and I hated myself for it. Compliments were dangerous. Little traps that lured you in before the ground gave way beneath your feet. I set down my fork with a clatter. Why are you saying this? To mess with me? To see if you can get a rise? His brows furrowed. No, because it's true. I shook my head, pushing back from the table. Men like you don't mean things like that. Not around here. Not when you've got a reputation to protect. Men like me? He repeated, leaning forward, voice sharp now. And what kind of man is that? The kind who'll wake up tomorrow and decide this was all a joke. My throat tightened. I've been through it before. I won't let it happen again. Before he could answer, I grabbed my jacket and stormed out. The screen door slammed behind me, echoing through the quiet night. I walked fast, boots crunching gravel, heart pounding hard enough to drown out reason. Anger, fear, desire. It all swirled together until I could hardly breathe. By the time I reached my rented room, I was shaking. I told myself I'd done the right thing, that leaving was the only way to protect myself. But alone in that room, I didn't feel safe. I felt hollow. Sleep came in restless fits, dreams pulling me back to his eyes, his laugh, the warmth of his hand on my back. I woke at dawn with the taste of whiskey still on my tongue and a pit in my stomach. I thought I'd left him behind at the ranch. I was wrong. A sharp knock rattled my door just after sunrise. I dragged myself out of bed, hair a mess, shirt wrinkled, and opened it with a scowl ready on my face. There he stood, broad shoulders filling the frame, sunlight painting his features gold. In his hands, a paper sack and a steaming cup of coffee. "Morning," he said, that damn smirk tugging at his lips again. "Brought breakfast." I opened my mouth to protest, but he cut me off, stepping closer, his eyes locking on mine. "You left too soon," he murmured, voice low, steady, carrying more weight than I could bear. I wasn't finished. And just like that, every wall I'd built around myself began to crack. I didn't know what to say when he stood there in my doorway, holding out breakfast like it was the most natural thing in the world. Part of me wanted to slam the door and pretend none of this had ever happened. The other part, the one that remembered the warmth of his hand steadying me on the roof, the weight of his eyes studying me at dinner, made me step aside. "Come in," I muttered. He smiled faintly, set the food on the rickety table by the window, and pulled up a chair. We ate in silence, the scrape of utensils and the occasional sip of coffee filling the space where my words wouldn't go. When we finished, he stood, tipped his hat, and said simply, "See you at the barn." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't pressure. It was an invitation to keep showing up. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I did. The next day, the roof felt different beneath my boots. Not just because of the work we'd done, but because he was there beside me. He didn't push, didn't tease as hard as before. Instead, he kept things light, telling jokes about the ranch hands, muttering curses at bent nails, laughing when a shingle slid down the roof and nearly hit him in the shoulder. I found myself laughing too, in spite of myself. It felt strange at first, foreign. Laughter hadn't come easy to me in years. But with him, it slipped out unguarded, surprising me as much as it seemed to surprise him. "You've got a good laugh," he said once, brushing sawdust from his arm. "Don't get used to it." I shot back, though the smile tugging at my lips betrayed me. As the hours passed, the banter softened into something quieter. Between hammer strikes and measuring boards, conversations deepened. He asked where I came from, what had brought me here, why I never stayed in one place too long. I gave him half-truths at first, pieces of my story without the whole. But then he told me something that shifted everything. "I know what it's like," he said, voice low, eyes fixed on the horizon. "What?" I asked, confused. "To love the wrong person. To pay the price for it." I froze, hammer mid-swing. He didn't look at me, just kept his gaze steady on the distant fields, as though speaking the words to the earth itself. "Years back," he continued, "there was a man, worked a ranch a few towns over. Strong, stubborn, had a smile that could ruin me. We thought we were careful, thought nobody knew. But small towns don't keep secrets. When folks found out, he left. Couldn't take the stares, the whispers. I stayed. And I've been living with the silence ever since." The roof creaked under us, but neither of us moved. His confession hung heavy in the air, mixing with the smell of hay and sun-warmed wood. My chest ached. Not just for him, but for the part of me that recognized every word. "You're not the only one who's been hurt," he said finally, turning to meet my eyes. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. But when our hands brushed as we reached for the same nail, I didn't pull away. Neither did he. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. We worked side by side, sweat stinging our eyes, laughter easing the long hours. Little things stood out. His shoulder pressing lightly against mine when space allowed more distance. His fingers brushing mine when he passed a tool. The way his gaze lingered a second too long before shifting away. One afternoon, while balancing on the rafters, I lost my footing for just a moment. He caught my arm before I could stumble, steadying me with ease. Our faces were inches apart, breath mingling in the hot air. My heart pounded so hard I thought he could hear it. "Careful," he murmured. "Guess you'll have to keep saving me?" I said before I could stop myself. His grin spread slow, dangerous. "Guess I don't mind." I looked away quickly, cheeks burning. But the words stayed lodged in my chest, warm and dangerous. It was late afternoon when the first rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. I glanced up, squinting at the dark clouds gathering in the distance. "Storm's coming," I muttered. "We can finish this row before it hits," he said confidently, though his eyes flicked toward the horizon with unease. We worked faster, shingles sliding into place, nails driven hard and quick. But the wind picked up, sharp and restless, tugging at our clothes. The clouds thickened, rolling closer until the sky turned heavy and gray. By the time the first raindrop hit my cheek, I knew we weren't going to beat it. "Down," he ordered, voice firm. We scrambled toward the ladder, boots slipping on the slickening roof. Rain pelted harder, soaking through my shirt in seconds. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the air. He reached the ground first, hand outstretched as I descended. Lightning split the sky, and I grabbed his arm, nearly falling into him as my boots hit the mud. "Barn!" he shouted over the storm, pulling me with him. We shoved the heavy doors closed just as the downpour unleashed in full force. The sound was deafening, rain hammering the tin roof like 1,000 drums. Inside, it was dim, the scent of hay and horses thick around us. We stood there, dripping wet, clothes clinging to our skin. Water dripped from his hat, sliding down his jaw. My breath caught as I looked at him, really looked at him, inches away, the space between us charged with something electric. His eyes met mine, piercing, unflinching. For a moment, neither of us moved. The storm outside raged, but in here, it felt like the world had narrowed to just this. Two men, soaked to the bone, hearts pounding, every unspoken word hanging heavy in the air. And I realized, with a mix of fear and longing, that the cracks in the roof weren't the only ones showing anymore. The barn was dim except for the faint light seeping through cracks in the wood. Rain roared above us, a steady drumbeat that drowned out everything else. My shirt clung to me, plastered against my skin, and I shivered though the air was warm. He stood only a breath away, hat pushed back, hair plastered to his forehead, water running in rivulets down his neck. His chest rose and fell heavy, like he'd just wrestled the storm into this very barn. And maybe he had. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The thunder outside filled the silence, but it felt like the real storm was here, between us, in the space so small I could feel the heat radiating off him. I told myself to step back, to break the tension, to remember every warning I'd ever carved into my heart. But my feet stayed rooted, and my eyes stayed locked on his. Then he moved. Slow, deliberate, giving me every chance to stop him. His hand rose, fingertips brushing my cheek, calloused yet gentle. The touch made my breath hitch, my heart hammering harder than the rain. And before I could think, before I could talk myself out of it, his lips found mine. The kiss was firm but unhurried, a claiming and a question all at once. Heat surged through me, electric and overwhelming. For one dizzying second, I let myself sink into it, into him. Then panic struck. I shoved him back, breath ragged. No, I can't. His chest heaved, rain still dripping down his jaw, but he didn't step forward again. He simply looked at me, eyes steady, voice low but certain. I see you, he said. I want you. The words hit harder than the thunder shaking the barn walls. My throat tightened. I wanted to believe him, God. I wanted to, but the ghosts of the past clawed at me. The whispers, the shame, the way love had been ripped from me once before. You don't know what you're saying, I rasped, backing toward the hay bales. You don't know what this will cost. He followed, not with his body, but with his gaze, unyielding, unwavering. I know exactly what it costs. I've paid it before. I froze, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might crack my ribs. He was telling me this wasn't just some game, not just a flirtation to pass the time. He meant it, but meaning it didn't make it safe. I can't, I whispered, my hands trembling at my sides. I can't go through heartbreak again. His expression softened, the smirk gone, replaced with something quieter, something that felt dangerously like tenderness. Then don't, he said. Don't go through it again. Let me carry some of it this time. Tears stung the corners of my eyes, and I blinked them away furiously. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to step into that warmth, let it burn away the cold that had clung to me for years. But trust wasn't built in a single kiss. Sensing the war raging inside me, he stepped back finally, giving me space. His voice gentled, steady like the hand that had once caught me on the roof. I won't push you, he said. I'll wait, however long it takes. The storm outside cracked, lightning flooding the barn with white light before plunging us back into shadow. My chest ached with the weight of everything unspoken, but in his patience, I felt something shift, a tiny crack in the walls I'd built. We stood like that until the rain eased, until the thunder rolled away across the hills. When it was quiet again, I gathered my things with shaking hands. He didn't stop me. He didn't plead or demand. He only watched, his eyes steady, like he already knew I'd be back. I walked home in the damp night air, every step heavy with the memory of his lips, his words, his promise. My room above the feed store felt colder than ever when I opened the door. I told myself I'd sleep, that the storm would pass from my heart like it had from the sky. But when I bent to unlace my boots, I saw it. A folded note slipped just beneath the doorframe. My breath caught as I picked it up, unfolding the paper with careful fingers. The handwriting was rough, uneven, but the words were clear. Come back tomorrow. Let me show you what love can feel like. The paper trembled in my hands as my heart thundered all over again. The note didn't leave my hands all night. I kept unfolding it, reading the words until I could see them even with my eyes closed. Come back tomorrow. Let me show you what love can feel like. By dawn, I knew I couldn't hide anymore. Fear still gnawed at me, sharp and merciless, but underneath it was something stronger, the longing I'd buried for years. I wanted to know if he meant it. I wanted to know if love could still be possible for someone like me. So I went back. He was already on the roof when I arrived, hammer ringing steady in the morning light. When he glanced down and saw me, his grin spread wide, like the sun breaking through clouds. You came, he called, as though there'd never been a doubt. I said I'd finish the job, I muttered, climbing the ladder. But he knew. He knew I wasn't just talking about the roof. We worked side by side, sweat on our brows, laughter breaking through the steady rhythm of hammer and nails. When my balance wavered, his hand was there. When his nail bent crooked, I teased him until he laughed so hard the shingles shook beneath us. Somewhere between the shingles and the laughter, between the teasing and the silence, something fragile but real grew. It wasn't the reckless heat of that first kiss. It was steadier, deeper, like the roof itself, built one plank at a time, stronger with every nail driven home. By the time the last shingle was laid, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in gold and fire. He set his hammer down, wiped his brow, and looked at me with a quiet certainty that made my chest ache. Come with me, he said softly. We walked out past the pastures, through tall grass swaying in the evening breeze, until we reached a meadow I'd never seen before. It was wide and open, rimmed with wildflowers and touched by the fading glow of sunset. The air smelled of earth and clover, sweet and clean. He stopped in the middle, turned to face me, and for once there was no smirk, no teasing glint in his eyes. Only earnestness. "I need you to hear me," he began, voice steady but threaded with emotion. "I don't want just a fling. I don't want someone to warm my bed and then disappear. I want more than that." My throat tightened. "More. I want a partner," he said, stepping closer. "Someone to build a life with. Someone to share the storms and the harvests, the laughter and the long nights. I want someone who'll stand by me when the world tries to tear us down. And I want that someone to be you." The meadow spun around me, the words hitting like thunder all over again. No one had ever spoken to me like that, like I was worthy of not just love, but forever. He reached for my hand, rough palm warm against mine. "Be my wife. Stay here. Build a life with me." The word jolted me, wife. No man had ever dared say it aloud to me. The world had only ever called me wrong, shameful, broken. But here he was, looking at me like I was the only truth he'd ever known. I stared at him, heart pounding so loud I could hardly hear the wind. I wanted to say yes. Every part of me longed to say yes. To belong. To be claimed, not hidden. To be someone's family. But fear rose up, choking me. I thought of the townsfolk, the whispers, the looks that could slice sharper than knives. I thought of being cast out again, ridiculed, left with nothing but ashes. My lips parted, but no sound came. He squeezed my hand, waiting, patient as ever. His eyes searched mine, not pleading but promising. Promising that if I stepped into this, he'd never let me fall alone. The sunset burned low, shadows stretching long across the meadow. The world held its breath, waiting for my answer. But I couldn't give it. Not yet. All my life I'd been fixing things. Broken shingles, sagging fences, busted wagon wheels, leaky barn roofs. People paid me because I could mend what others let rot. I'd crawl up high or stoop down low, set my jaw, and patch the world back together with my hands. But when it came to my own heart, the cracks and splinters left by shame and rejection, I'd let them gape wide open. I convinced myself some things weren't meant to be fixed. Until him, standing in that meadow with the sunset fading, his hand holding mine steady, I realized maybe I wasn't broken after all. Maybe I'd just been waiting for someone who saw me as worth mending. The fear was still there, sharp and familiar, whispering warnings of what the world would say. But his words rang louder. "Be my wife. Build a life with me." And for once, I let myself choose hope over fear. "Yes," I whispered, my voice trembling. Then stronger, "Yes." His smile spread wide, so pure it made my chest ache. He pulled me close, kissed me hard, kissed me sure, and for the first time in years I didn't push anyone away. I let myself fall because I knew his arms would be there. The weeks that followed blurred into a flurry of plans, hammering, laughter, and nervous joy. We didn't have much, no fancy invitations, no family blessings. My kin hadn't spoken to me in years, and his had drifted away long before. But we had the barn. The same roof we'd built together, plank by plank, nail by nail. He said it was fitting that if our love had grown under that roof, then it should be blessed beneath it too. The ranch hands rallied around us. They strung lanterns from the rafters, swept the floors until they shone, and lined the walls with wildflowers gathered from the meadow. One of the older hands carved us a table, small but sturdy, where we'd sign our vows. On the day itself, the sky was wide and blue, the air rich with the smell of hay and clover. I stood in a plain shirt, hands trembling, my heart pounding harder than any hammer I'd ever swung. For a moment, I thought about the empty seats where family should have been. A hollow ache tugged at me, but then I looked around. The barn was full. Ranch hands, neighbors who dared to show up, even the cook from the feed store who slipped me extra bread sometimes. They clapped my shoulder, smiled wide, shouted that they were proud. And suddenly I didn't feel abandoned. I felt chosen. When he walked in, dressed simple but glowing all the same, everything else blurred. His eyes found mine across the barn, steady as always, and the world steadied with them. We stood beneath the roof we had built with our own sweat, and spoke the words that bound us tighter than nails or beams ever could. No priest, no paper, no lawmaker could define what we already knew. We were home in each other. When it came time to kiss, he leaned in close, his lips brushing mine, and whispered for only me to hear, "I told you, I'd never let you fall." The cheer that went up shook the rafters. Someone uncorked whiskey. Someone else played fiddle in the corner, and soon the barn filled with laughter and dancing, lantern light flickering across smiling faces. I held his hand through it all, reluctant to ever let go, because letting go meant risking that it was all a dream. But it wasn't. It was real. Later, after the lanterns dimmed and the laughter softened into quiet murmurs, we slipped outside. The roof loomed above us, dark against the starlit sky, solid and strong. Our roof. He pulled me against his chest, wrapping me in the steady warmth of his arms. I tilted my head back, staring at the endless stars, and for the first time, I didn't feel small beneath them. I felt whole. "Strange, isn't it?" I said softly. "All my life, I've been patching roofs to keep other people dry. Never thought I'd find one over my own heart." He kissed the top of my head, slow and gentle. "You've found more than a roof," he murmured. "You've found a home." My eyes stung, but the tears were sweet this time, because he was right. I had spent years wandering, carrying my broken heart like a burden I'd never be free of. But now, with him, I wasn't wandering anymore. I was home, and as the stars shimmered above us, as the barn we built stood tall behind us, I knew this wasn't just the end of my story of heartbreak. It was the beginning of a life, one held together not by nails and wood, but by love that would outlast every storm. And that's how I finally found home. Not in a house, not under a roof, but in the heart of someone who saw me, wanted me, and never let me fall. What about you? Do you believe love can find us when we least expect it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of love, courage, and second chances.